Thank you everyone for joining our Slow Your Roll traffic calming info session. My name is Brenda Perez. I am the bilingual community engagement coordinator at Walk Bike Nashville. Really quickly, Walk Bike Nashville's mission is to build a more walkable, bikeable Nashville for all, and we do this through our intentional programming and collaboration. Today, we are collaborating with our dear partners at Metro Public Works, and we're really thankful to have Derek here after hours to be able to make this information accessible for everyone. A little bit about our work at Walk Bike Nashville is we do lots of different types of programming. We have an education component, which is like safe routes to school programming as part of that, which teaches elementary children how to walk and ride their bike safely to school. We have large scale events like Tour de Nash, which is a really great entry point for people to ride their bicycles around the city and a really great way to see the city. And then we do advocacy work, such as our Families for Safe Streets, which advocate for infrastructure and policy changes to reduce and eliminate pedestrian deaths in Nashville. So if you're interested in any of that, we invite you to visit our website and sign up for our email list or become a member. And that's all you're going to hear from me on that. I know y'all came here to hear from Derek at Metro Public Works, so I am going to pass it over to him. And I'm going to invite everybody to share your questions using the chat feature or the Q&A. Robert Johnson, who is a staff member at Walk Bike Nashville, is going to be keeping an eye on that and make sure that all of your questions get answered.
All right, thank you, Brenda. Like she said, my name is Derek Haggerty, traffic engineer with the city of Nashville. Traffic calming is one of the programs that I oversee. So today, I just want to give a quick rundown on one, what is traffic calming? Two, the traffic calming process we currently have in place for selecting and implementing projects here in Nashville. And then finally, talk about the finances behind it. I want to give everyone a look to see what a project costs us piece by piece to really help you understand the budget that we're working with and how we can piece these projects together in your neighborhood. Make sure I can get my slides working here. All right, so first off, what is traffic calming? The big question. Really, it's any physical measures that we can use to reduce traffic speeds. So this can be anything from signage and pavement markings to speed humps, traffic circles, anything, everything in between. When we look at combating vehicle speeding, we have, well, it used to be 3 E's, we have 4 E's now. So it's engineering, which is what traffic calming comes under, education, which Walk Bike Nashville is a fantastic partner for us in that regard, enforcement, and then evaluation. The evaluation is a new part. We really want to make sure that once we put these projects in place, once we do our education efforts, once we have some targeted enforcement, we're coming back, looking and seeing what the impact is so that as we move forward, we feel good about the measures that we're using. So just some examples. I don't think any of these pictures are in Nashville, but we do have some examples around the city. This is just an example here of what we can do with striping. This street here, the striping has been put in to look, almost like there's a curve in the road when there's not. So just a way to visually share with drivers that this street's different, residential area. We see some pedestrian activity here. Hey, it's a neighborhood, let's go a little slower. Speed radar signs, something we've been using a little more often around the city. Chicanes, we have a couple examples of these over in East Nashville, essentially forces vehicles to slow down to weave through. Speed cushions, very popular one, similar to speed humps, but we do have gaps in these. And this is actually what our emergency management services prefer that we install. So vehicles with a wide track width, anything greater than 72 inches, which is, as you can see, fire engines, ambulances, buses, they can pass through without having to slow down. Any other vehicle, though, even if you got a really large pickup truck, an F-250, F-350, you will have to go over these, will have to slow down. Also, just another example here, traffic circles. These are simply concrete islands placed in the middle of existing intersections. Vehicles have to slow down to go around these. But unlike a typical roundabout, we don't have to buy up excess right-of-way, buy those neighbors' property up and expand the project. So easier to do, smaller scale, can also bring in some greenery and art into the neighborhood. Right, so those are just some examples of what traffic calming is. Why do we need it? Well, first off, here in Nashville, the vast majority of our streets are really designed for cars. Davidson County as a whole is over 500 square miles. Majority of this is a very suburban style city. A lot of our housing was built post World War II. And at the time, the thought process was, we're building for cars. So that's really what you see here. Probably in the last 20 years is probably being generous. In the last 5 to 10 years, that thinking has been starting to change, realizing that we want everyone to have access to our streets, regardless of your mode of transportation. Now, unfortunately, it's just going to take a while and probably some resources and some education to kind of change our behaviors, change how our streets behave. Additionally, Nashville, no surprise, up until, I guess, 10 months ago now when COVID hit, traffic volumes were pretty high. Our interstates were full, our major arterials were getting full, people are taking shortcuts through neighborhoods as part of their commute, going faster, just trying to get from point A to point B, not thinking about the other peoples in that area. Then navigational technology, obviously a big one. Most drivers now have GPS that's leading them through neighborhoods that they would never have gone through before, never would have known, trying to make up an extra minute or two. So with all this coming in, I think Nashville recognizes that we have to do something to protect our local streets, our residential areas. And that's where the traffic calming program comes into place. So just a quick look at the history of traffic calming here. Most of this is from Wikipedia, so take it with a grain of salt. I'm not promising it's 100% accurate, but first automobile developed 1885. Just a little over 10 years later, first speeding ticket was issued in Kent, England. They caught someone going 12 miles an hour in a 3-mile-an-hour zone. This is also one I don't know if it's true. By the 1930s, though, over in the United Kingdom, they were already looking at traffic calming measures to protect residential streets. The Dutch really jumped on this bandwagon in the 1960s, introduced what's translated to living streets. I'm not going to pronounce the actual phrase, but really focusing on building streets that are not just for vehicles. In the United States, we already saw diverters coming in the mid-1960s to keep traffic out of our residential neighborhoods. And really for Nashville, the first big push started in 1999 when the city put together $300,000 in funding for traffic calming. Now, it was a pretty new idea to a lot of people in the city, and we had some projects that, from my understanding, did not go well. There were speed bumps installed in Green Hills that were not popular at all. And because of that, the program really went dormant for almost 20 years. So that's something that's still in the back of the mind of a lot of people here in Nashville as we reintroduce traffic calming. We're really focused on making sure we have neighborhood buy-in, that we're being very careful with what we install so that we don't have another setback such as this. I think now, I'll talk about what we've done to date with the program since it's essentially relaunched. I think we've shown that we're not necessarily going to make those same mistakes going forward. Obviously, these projects are never 100% popular, but we're really working hard on that neighborhood buy-in aspect. And then jumping forward, 2019, Nashville funded $1.5 million in traffic calming. And that really led to a revamp of how we do things. So before I talk about the program now, just want to talk about some simple tips that if you're looking for relief today, these are some things that can help. Number one, and most obvious, drive the speed limit or slower. If everyone drives the speed limit or slower, drives at a reasonable speed in our neighborhoods, there'd be no need for this. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but the more people we can get to buy into that, we can have a pretty good impact. Next one is street parking. One of the things that we've seen that's very successful is if we can narrow the driver's visual field, either through striping, vertical delineation, or simply street parking, that can really lead to reduced speeds. Now, every street in Nashville, you can't park on the street. Some we have drainage ditches, but if you can in your neighborhood, get a few people that have their cars out there, it can really make a difference. Also, safety in numbers involving your neighbors. If drivers are coming into a neighborhood, they see a lot of pedestrians out, a lot of people on bicycles, a lot of activity in the neighborhood, they tend to drive slower. You're giving them that cue that, this isn't just a street to get from point A to point B on your commute, on your delivery route. This is a place where people live. It's part of the community. Another great resource we have is the Nashville Police Department Community Coordinators. Each of our precinct has a community coordinator just responsible for working with the local neighborhoods, local community. These are, honestly, in my opinion, some of the best employees that Metro Nashville has. They're fantastic. Now, they can't solve all your problems, but they can help with things such as scheduling, speed enforcement, and coming out and helping educating neighbors. And then finally, what we really came here to talk about today is neighborhoods can apply to the Metro Neighborhood Traffic Calming Program. So as I mentioned, this program was revamped in 2019, and we really used the Boston Slow Streets program as our template. So that's where it came about. We implemented a twice yearly application period where neighborhoods have the chance to apply to this program. We're currently in one of those application periods through July 29th. So if you're interested in applying for this program, you can go to our website. It's on the nashville.gov page. Under Public Works, you can find traffic calming. If you also just search Nashville traffic calming, it'll be the first thing that pops up. Along with that, we've gone to a data-driven selection process. Prior to this, it was kind of a squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of thing. The people that complained loudest, they were getting some level of traffic calming. And we've implemented a system more that's looking at the raw data that we can collect. And a big one, like I mentioned earlier, neighborhood-led solutions. We typically have at least 2, if not 3 or 4 neighborhood meetings before we finalize any plans. We want to make sure what's ever going in these neighborhoods, the people that live there are in favor of. What I always tell people is, I am probably never going to drive on any of these streets. I want it to be safe for the people that live there. But at the end of the day, it doesn't make a difference to me if we use speed radar signs, speed humps, traffic circles. I'm never going to be driving that street. My kids aren't going to be playing in that street. So we really want to make sure neighbors are on board with this. And then I do just want to talk about this past year, 2020. No surprise, has been a challenge across government, really across the country and the world. We've really come under a capital spending freeze right now, and the program is essentially finishing up some existing projects, but we're not initiating anything new, and we haven't since I think September 2019 was our last round of selection. We were prioritizing neighborhoods, collecting data right when the tornado hit back in March. So we put a pause on that as Public Works kind of shifted our focus to tornado recovery. And then shortly after that, with COVID hitting, I think citywide, there were a lot of funding questions, budget questions going around, and at Public Works, our mindset really shifted into a maintenance and repair. So we didn't have a lot of new projects initiated. Going forward, we don't know when that next round of funding is going to be authorized. We know this program is a priority still. It's been incorporated in the new Nashville Transportation Plan. Just what that timeline looks like, I just can't tell you at this time. So going into the application, like I said, we're in a window right now. There you can see our website, trafficcalming.nashville.gov. A lot of information on there. Also some of the data we've collected, some of the projects we've done. I also want to point out, if you ever need anything from the city of Nashville, Hub Nashville is a great first place to start. Hub.nashville.gov is our website. There's an app you can download, or you can just simply call 311. If there is anything you have for the city. A street light is out, you need paving, there's overhead, overhead sign needs replacing, call Hub Nashville, we can take care of that. Also under that, any signage or pavement marking requests you have, which can be done separate from the traffic calming program, can be entered through Hub Nashville. So getting back to the application itself, 4 pages, but I hope it's simpler than it sounds. The first thing we have is we just want to see some level of neighborhood support. So we'll ask either that a neighborhood organization, approves the application, or you just have 4 individuals from the street approve it. Before we invest our time in these neighborhoods, we just want to make sure that that people are on board. As part of this, there is a petition process before we actually install a project. So we just want to make sure that people do support this before we start spending our resources. Next up, we ask neighborhoods to prioritize streets. So just rank them in order of priority. Depending on our funding, we generally cannot collect speed data on all streets. So we will use that priority list to choose where we do that data collection, specifically for speeds. Finally, traffic issues. We also ask that neighbors just write the issues we're seeing. Sometimes we see things that can be solved outside of this program, through different funding streams, and we're happy to do that. Then finally, we just ask that really that meetings are civil, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. So the data collection process, once we have all these applications in hand, once we have funding, we're going to go out and collect data. Most of the data we gather is actually stuff we already have on file. So we'll pull the crash history. Every single crash that MNPD responds to is geographically coded, entered in a system, open data. Anyone with internet access can pull this. We use that to help drive our selection process. We also looked at neighborhood destinations within there, things such as nearby parks, schools, things of that nature that drive a lot of pedestrian traffic, especially with children and the elderly. And then active transportation, we're looking at things like, are there bus stops nearby, bike lanes? Does the neighborhood not have sidewalks? And then finally, speed studies. The picture you see before you here is how we collect our speeds. We lay out pneumatic tubes, just small black rubber tubes. As vehicles drive over them, we're able to calculate their speeds. So if you ever see these out in the street, that's what's going on. As part of this process, we always share the speed study results with the neighborhoods, even if we're not able to select a neighborhood for a project at that time. So at least you have an idea, and that's information that can be really useful to the police department as well, as we break down those speeds by time of day. When you're asking for speed enforcement, if you just tell the police department, hey, they're speeding here all the time, that's not necessarily helpful to them. If they come out there at 10:30, there's no cars out there, they might just mentally write it off. If we can bring them a study and say, hey, between 4:30 and 5:15, the average speed on our street is 42 miles an hour, that's something that they can really help with. All right. So once we have our data, we'll put together a prioritization list. Every neighborhood is put through this 100-point scale. 40 points of this is based on the crash history. We look at the crashes over the past 5 years, and we average that out per mile. So we'll end up with, number of crashes per year per mile. So it's fairly even across neighborhoods. And just as part of this, if MNPD does not record a crash, we don't know that it happens. So we always encourage neighborhoods to, record crashes, even if it's a hit and run, someone hits your mailbox, drives away. Still great to have the police come, get a report, get that into the system just so we know about it. Otherwise, it's like it didn't happen when we're looking at our data. Measured speeds make up 30 points of that. So when we lay those tubes out, we'll collect the speeds. That's a big portion of this. And then we give 15 points each to active transportation neighborhood destinations. Active transportation is really anything that encourages or forces people into the right of way. So that can be lack of sidewalks in a neighborhood. It can be bus stops nearby where people have to wait in the street. bike lanes, anything of that nature. Neighborhood destinations, like I mentioned, just areas that drive pedestrian traffic. And to keep this a little simpler, we do just keep this as essentially public areas, schools, parks, libraries, things of that nature. One, it's easier for us because we have all this data on file. Two, we don't necessarily want to be in the business of determining what exactly is a pedestrian driver. We don't want to say what isn't a church, that kind of thing. So once we get that, we'll put together our traffic calming prioritization list. Before you now, as an example, I think this was our July 2019 list. So we rank all the neighborhoods 1 through however many we have. Based on our funding, we cut it off at a certain point, and the neighborhoods on the left, those are the ones we're able to do a project with right away. Everyone else will recollect data in 6 months and just redo the prioritization list. We'll always post this on our website so people can see and share the data behind it. Now, big thing I want to say here is, you can see the small differences between, Cleveland Park, Cross Timbers, which were selected, and Sevier Park, West Marathona, which just missed the cutoff. If we don't select your neighborhood, that's not saying that there is not a speeding issue, that there's not a safety issue in your neighborhood. We just have a limited number of resources, and currently this is the system we use to make those selections. I will say this could change in the future. The Nashville Planning Department is putting together a Vision Zero action plan. For those of you that are not familiar, Vision Zero is a program aimed at essentially eliminating all pedestrian, bicyclists, serious injuries, and fatalities on our streets. So and it's a very data-driven process. So I think we'll see more factors included in that program that will spread out to how we make selections for all types of programs here in Nashville, and traffic calming will definitely be part of that. One of the things we've been talking about here is we really don't have great equity factors for our selection process. And we know that's going to be included in that Vision Zero action plan. So I think you'll see that trickle in here. When that'll take place, when that plan will be finished, I don't know. Not expecting it in the next few months, but I think 6 months to a year is probably reasonable. I'm also not in the planning department, so don't hold them to that number. So post-selection, after we select the neighborhoods, we first send an email to every single applicant. For those that are not selected, we share the data, let them know that that application is going to remain on file until we are able to get a project in that neighborhood. So once you apply to this program, you apply once, we keep it on file, hopefully forever. Well, not forever, until we get you a project. If your neighborhood is selected, the first thing we do, set up a neighborhood meeting where we share data and really do a presentation similar to this. Talk about typical measures, show neighbors where they can go and see some of these measures in Nashville. And then we'll have a design charrette, either at that meeting or at a separate one. We'll roll out some big maps of the neighborhood, invite everyone up, have them start marking up the neighborhoods. Where do we want to see speed cushions? Where do we want radar signs? Where do we need markings? That kind of thing. We really want this design to come from the neighborhood. We'll have engineers there to, provide some advice, kind of make sure what we're doing is safe. What we're doing is going to get the results we want, but we really want the neighbors to take the lead on this. And then I'll take whatever we came up with, bring it back, put together a quick sketch, send that back to the neighborhood, and we'll really keep a pretty iterative process going. If we have to move something 5 feet to the left, 5 feet to the right, we'll do that. If we have to start completely over, we'll do that too. Very iterative process. Once we're happy with our design though, we'll move into a neighborhood petition. Before we install anything, we'll require that 70% of residences in the affected area approve the plans. That's a pretty high number, and we do ask neighborhoods to take the lead on that. Then finally, installation and construction will follow next. At that point, we'll get the project going. Some of our materials are made to order. So after the petition, it still generally takes us 2 to 3 months to finish the project. Now, this entire process is entirely dependent on really how fast we move through the design process. We've had some projects, from initiation to construction complete in 4 months. We have others that have been going on for over a year as we try to, finish the design process, finish the neighborhood petition process. So there's no rush to it, but we do realize it's going to take time. Once you're selected, it's probably not going to be a project in place in the next 30 days. Project budget. So this is something that I don't think I've shared before in public meetings, but I think it's really important for everyone to understand going forward with this program. Right now, we budget $50,000 per neighborhood. Kind of hoping that rises to $60,000 going forward. As little money is always good. Obviously, the more money we spend per neighborhood, the fewer neighborhoods we can have projects in. Additional costs to this program, just beyond our staff time internally and the actual construction, is we do have some consultant costs. The data collection, specifically the speed measurements, we do contract out. We just don't have the resources to do that much in-house. We can do a couple speed studies a week, but if we're doing 50, 60 in a month, that's just beyond our capacity. Also, if for some reason I cannot attend a meeting or don't have time to work on design, we'll send that out to consultants. So right now, we're able to keep those costs pretty low as the number of projects stay low. If we do reach the point where funding greatly increases and we're selecting a lot more projects, you're probably going to see the consultant costs rise just as we have more demands put on our staff time. So what does that buy? Just want to talk about these are some normal traffic calming measures we see. First thing, just a crosswalk. We pay $30 per linear foot for a crosswalk. So if we have a crosswalk going 30 feet across the street, that's just short of $1,000. Striping for a 4-inch line, we're looking at $3,500 per mile. And to put that in a little more context, if you're on a street with 2 white edge lines and a double yellow center line, we're looking at $14,000 per mile. Speed cushions. So we saw these earlier on. These are the speed humps with gaps in them. The price for these ranges between what you see before you there, just under $3,000 to $5,500, depending on the width of the street. If we're on a narrow street, 22 feet or less, we just need 2 speed cushions, so one location only costs us $2,750. If it's a street that's over 30 feet, we'll need 4 cushions, so that's where we're at that $5,500 number. Speed tables, I don't think I included a picture of these, but these are essentially a speed hump that goes all the way across the street, but is much wider, so it's a little more of a gentle, can be navigated at slightly higher speeds. Speed cushions, you have to slow down to about 10, 15 miles an hour. Speed tables, you can take at about 20, 25 miles an hour. You can see those are $9,000. So, while they're a lot more comfortable to drivers, really with speed cushions, you can do 2 to 3 times as many of them. Radar speed signs, those cost us $1,800 each. That's just for material. Those we install in-house. Traffic circle, those are those concrete islands dropped into intersections. That really depends on the size of the traffic circle, but $12,500 to $25,000, and that's all size dependent. Raised crosswalk. So this is something I'm really a big fan of. It's essentially a speed hump and crosswalk all in one, built in the street. With the concrete costs, though, the drainage, these run us about $20,000 to $30,000. So under this program, we can really only do a couple of these in a neighborhood. And then finally, pedestrian paths. This is similar to a sidewalk. It's actually probably most similar to a protected bike lane. We'll take out a section of the street, stripe it off, put in some vertical delineators, and create similar to a sidewalk, but on the street. And speaking of sidewalks, as I mentioned, Nashville really, when you look at it from a high level, it's a very suburban style city. Most of our neighborhoods are suburban style neighborhoods. And I think probably 90% of the neighborhoods that apply would be happy to have a sidewalk. That would be their number one choice. And the big thing with that is that sidewalks are really just a lot more expensive than any of this. I know Public Works just put a report together, probably in the last year. I think the average cost for us to build a sidewalk is just shy of $10,000 per linear foot. So, with this traffic calming program here, as an alternative to a sidewalk, instead of building a quarter mile of sidewalk, we can get projects like these in 10 to 12 neighborhoods. So that's really where we think this program is beneficial. This may not be the exact thing your neighborhood wants, but we think it can make a pretty big impact at a lower cost so we can reach more neighborhoods. But this is just really a look at the finances here. If anyone is on here who was involved in the traffic calming program earlier, these costs have come down. We've been able to get some contracts in place that have lowered our material costs by about a quarter. So we're hoping going forward, our dollar's going to be able to go a little bit further. But, this is about what we can do in neighborhoods, and we can mix and match this as we want. We're just looking at that $50,000 number that we're trying to stay under. So that concludes my presentation. I'm sure there's plenty of questions out there. I know Brenda and Robert are going to help moderate those. My email address is here. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Happy to answer anything.
Thank you, Derek. We do have some great questions. So let me pull that up. Our first, we have some questions coming in from our Facebook live streaming. So thanks everyone for tuning in. One was, where could people find the information on geographic crash data? And Robert shared the link of data.nashville.gov. And so if you think that's a good resources, are there other resources people should use?
Nope, that's the best one. Apart from crash data, there's really a wealth of information from the city there. It's not always the easiest to read if you're not familiar with it, but I think each of them does have an explainer of how to look at the data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there was another questions about what's the difference in effectiveness between a cushion versus a radar speed sign?
Yeah, good question. So, all of these have different levels of effectiveness, and it can vary by neighborhood. So what we see is that any active measure, so anything that physically forces you to slow down, is going to be more effective because it applies to everyone. So installing speed cushions, traffic circles, those make vehicles slow down. So those are always going to be most effective. However, speed radar signs are, if we have a neighborhood where people say, I don't want to drive over a bump every day for the rest of my life, the speed radar signs, we've seen average speeds drop 4 to 5 miles an hour in neighborhoods with those. Now, obviously, someone can still fly through there at 70 miles an hour. They choose to ignore the sign. It's not going to affect them at all. And that really goes for most of these measures too. If people have their hearts set on speeding, they're going to be able to do that. What we're doing with this program is creating conditions that encourage drivers to go at a reasonable speed. If someone is dead set on it, we're just never going to be able to catch everyone. We can significantly lower the number of speeders.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, thank you. We have a few more. So folks wanted to know how they should treat prior applications if they're automatically in the mix. And I know it says a little bit something on the trafficcalming.nashville.gov website, but any other details that people should keep in mind before submitting an application?
Yeah, absolutely. So we keep all our applications on file, and on our website that Brenda just listed, we do have a link of all applications on file. So before you apply, you can click that. It's sorted by council district, and you can see if there's already an application for your neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. And if there's an application, should they submit another one? Will that make it stronger? Is it better for y'all to receive multiple applications?
Yeah, so number of signatures, number of applications has no effect on our selection process. We're just looking at that 100-point system. So you can absolutely submit another application, but it's not going to make a difference how we select the neighborhoods.
Cool. Wonder. And then we have some questions coming in from Facebook saying, is there a way that people can increase the funding for these programs?
Yeah. So this currently is a capital funded program, which means every year in the budget, council mayor's office puts this together. It varies by year. So letting your council members know, letting the mayor's office know that you support this program. Like I said, it's been adopted into the transportation plan. So both council and the mayor's office has recognized the value of this. Now that we do have a few of these projects in place across the neighborhood, we're able to share across the city. We're able to share data showing that it does work and people can really see this. I think that's helping spread the message. Mm-hmm. I will say the other thing that you can do, I did see Councilmember Cash on here. I'm going to use him as an example. If you have a new development coming in, generally developers for large scale projects are required to submit a traffic impact study to our development team. As part of that, we can include conditions on the project. And we have had council members in the planning department start including traffic calming measures on those projects. So, as these developments are coming into neighborhoods, traffic's increasing, we're able to help balance that by traffic calming projects. And we've seen this start popping up not only in Councilmember Cash's district, but in Donaldson, East Nashville, Bellevue, all across the city. So that's a really good thing to keep an eye on. And we can catch a lot of that internally, but it's always good to just drop that bug in your council member's ear if you see something happening.
Perfect. So there's Angie Henderson, dropped a question in the chat too, and they're wondering about the cost of the pedestrian path. Is that a $60,000 per pedestrian path or?
Sorry, that's $60,000 per linear mile.
Okay.
Yep. So depending on the size of the neighborhood, obviously that can vary. And I will say my cost numbers there, if we need traffic control out there, which we do in certain neighborhoods, those costs can be a little higher when you factor in the overall project cost. But those numbers are pretty accurate for how we mix and match up to that 50,000 number. And I will also say, just because we say that's our budget, if you have a small neighborhood, and you just say, hey, we want maybe 5 or 6 speed radar signs, that's fine. We don't have to spend $50,000.
They don't just get to spend the money, the whole allotment.
Right.
Cool. Well, Carrie, on that question, in our chat, somebody's asking where they can see an example of a pedestrian path in Nashville or what that would look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So we just put one on Battlefield Drive a few months ago, and then this was before my time, but I think it's let me get the street name right. It's either Marcos or San Marcos Drive down on the south side of the city. So those are probably the best two right now, but really just think of it as a bike lane essentially, but for pedestrians.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Thanks. All right. And then we have some questions about maybe creating new opportunities. People want to know if there's examples or opportunities for public art to be incorporated into traffic calming, perhaps a partnership with Metro Arts Commission or private groups.
Yeah, absolutely. And we work pretty closely with Metro Arts on this. That's always something I pitch to the neighborhoods during the meeting. We just think art is a great way to make that neighbor, to bring in some placemaking, just really make it feel like a neighborhood. So always encourage that. Metro Arts is a great partner in this, and they're always willing to assist. I know we've also worked with, Walk Bike Nashville to get some projects in around the city as well.
Cool, yeah. So definitely an invite to our artists community out there to help shape these streets and make them safer for everyone.
I will include just a pitch for Metro Arts. They do have an Art in the Right of Way program. They have a website you can go to, and if you're interested in doing something like that, either there's a lot of different examples, but any art in the right of way in the public street, feel free to reach out to them. They initiate the process, they walk neighborhoods through it, and then it comes to us at Public Works just for safety checks and to make sure it's in line with regulations.
Nice, thanks. There was also a question about if we work with the Nashville Civic Design Center, because they have like a tactical urbanism program, but has Metro Public Works worked with them in the past, or opportunities there?
Yeah, absolutely. We work with the Civic Design Center. I would say fairly often. They always have projects popping up. I know we just did one over in East Nashville, which our bus service was also partner in to put in almost a little roadside cafe at a bus stop. I think of the more recent ones. I have something that I'm trying to do with them. We're just waiting to get some approvals on, which I'm going to hold off until it's in. But yeah, we've absolutely worked with Civic Design Center, and I think we got Robert on here. I think all three of us, Walk Bike Nashville, Civic, Metro Nashville, did a small project over at Anqui Elementary in Madison. Yeah, so we're, I think with this traffic calming program, we'll take all the resources we can get. We're always happy to work with our nonprofits in the city.
Wonderful. Yeah, and it's so important to get our people to shape their own neighborhoods and their communities in a way that they're going to appreciate them even more and take care of them, and make our city a stronger place and beautiful place to live. We do have some questions about if neighborhoods could fund their own traffic calming projects.
Yeah, so right now, it's Public Works policy that we do not install privately funded traffic calming measures in the right of way. So we have had neighborhoods put up their own speed radar signs, and we'll help work with them on that. But things such as speed cushions, speed humps, right now, that's just not something that we authorize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And before anyone asks, that's above my level to do anything about.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I got a list of projects I would like to do, so.
Yeah, so I guess for something like that, it would always be best to work with an organization that maybe does that kind of work to, come up with creative ways to explore that. Yeah. Ooh, and then there's a question in there about the budget. So, and this is also outside of my my information. So we can definitely answer that now, or circle back with it and post it on social media. But do you have any indication what your budget in CSP will be this coming year? Any conversations about additional staffing or scaling up the program?
No, unfortunately, this is probably above my level too. I'm an engineer at Public Works, program manager for this. I haven't heard anything yet, budget wise. Right now, we're also under a hiring freeze. So I think in the near term, in the next few months, I definitely don't expect growth. What the budget looks like, unfortunately, that's beyond my ability to answer.
Yeah, and think, we definitely at Walk Bike Nashville want to encourage everybody to get into these conversations about the budget. It's our money, our people's money, and we should definitely, voice our opinions on where we want them to spend that money. Walk Bike Nashville definitely has a position on it. We want things to be accessible, walkable, bikeable to our community. So that's how we feel about that. We're just getting also some thank yous from folks on Facebook. So thank you, Derek, for spending this time. I think we're gonna, we've got into most of the questions. I don't know if you wanted to share any other closing thoughts or things that people should look out for in regards to traffic calming or maybe other opportunities in the year.
Yeah, no, I think, my big thing on the screen right now, my email address. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, let me know. I always prefer if information comes from me directly, just to be as clear as possible. And want to thank Walk Bike Nashville for having me. They do a great job spreading this information out through the community, and they've been a great partner, especially for me since I've been here with Metro.
Well, that's great to hear. And I also want to say that Derek is really great at answering emails. I've even emailed him so many times with the Open Streets projects and about this, and he's really quick and really great to work with. So I hope you all flood his inbox. So really want to thank you, Derek, for your time. And there's a few more questions that we're going to just answer in our comments on the live stream. So we really just want to appreciate Metro Public Works and Derek for taking his time this evening, and Derek's family as well for taking his time this evening to get this information out to our folks. The application is now open. We shared the link in the comments and also in the chat box. So really want to encourage people to take a look at that, and maybe if it's something that you consider for this year or consider for future years, know that it's a resource and it's a way that we can make our city a little bit safer. And with that, I just want to also appreciate all the questions that came in. I really love the participation that is involved in how we shape our city. So really thankful for all the folks who logged on the Zoom and on the Facebook. If y'all want to get involved in any sort of things like this, Walk Bike Nashville is here for that. So you can always find us on social media at Walk Bike Nashville, or hit us up on email at info@walkbikenashville.org, and get connected, or visit our website. There's lots of resources there. And with that, yeah, I think we're gonna say good evening to everyone and hope everyone has a restful Thursday evening. All right.